Nate, today we're going to be talking about players that we're not drafting and who we'd rather draft instead, or what we would trade that pick for, because, hey, sometimes not drafting somebody is just as important as knowing who to trade for. Let's start with you, Nate. Wasn't surprised when I saw this one on here, although I will say the landing spot is kind of growing on me. What do you got?
There's certainly opportunity there in Buffalo for Keon Coleman, but as of right now, Keon Coleman going to a situation where he could be asked to be the wide receiver one.
You
I'm
think?
not a. I mean, what his competition is? Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel.
Yeah. Curtis Samuel's a good NFL wide receiver.
They are, but when you draft a guy at 33, and especially a player
Forgetting
of
about Matt
Keon,
Collins, Justin Shorter, Andy Isabella, KJ Hamler. Didn't know he was still around.
yeah, from
Quintez
there.
Cephas, welcome back to the NFL into Buffalo.
All right. Look, I like the potential of Keon Coleman, but going back to something I said last podcast, not trying to make a direct line between Keon Coleman and Quentin Johnston, but I think Keon Coleman needs to develop more.
I agree.
I don't think that's a wild take. You look at his route running. You look at, he ran the gauntlet fast, great, but also he was swerving. He couldn't stop at the end of it. Just because he ran it fast does not mean he's very technical. He's definitely athletic. He's got those highlight catches, but he's not technically sound at this point. So if he's thrown into that offense and asked to do more than he's capable of, that's something that I'm worried about, especially for that short term production, which I think people are going to expect out of him with his draft capital, with the landing spot, with the open wide receiver room. There's certainly opportunity. It would be rather easy, I think, for him to prove me wrong if he can put it together. I don't have anything against the guy. I watched some of those post draft videos of him. He seems like a really fun guy. So I'll definitely be rooting for him, but I'm hesitant to pick him up at the value that he's currently going, which is the 202, Mike.
Okay.
If I'm picking up Keon Coleman mid, late second, I'm totally fine with that. But at the very early second, especially when we saw 14 first rounders in this NFL draft, at the 14th pick, there's other guys I would rather have. I would possibly be looking at one of the running backs that's left on the board. Jonathan Brooks probably off the board at this point, but I would be interested in Trey Benson here. Other wide receivers, hey, I like to pick up Ladd McConkey in the first round. You probably can pick him up at the 202, and I like that a lot better. Some other players I also like here at the 202. I don't know if Xavier Worthy's still around, but he could be around. Brian Thomas. We'll see a mix of those guys that they fall into the late first, into the early second, depending on where the quarterbacks go. We've seen Michael Penix go in the first round in a couple of drafts, and that's a little crazy for us. But at Keon Coleman's draft cost right now, I'm just not willing to buy in. So looking at those other players, or maybe selling the 202 for a guy like Rashee Rice, who I still think is a great buy opportunity.
I agree.
Yes, it looks bad short term. Maybe it's a 2-game suspension, maybe it's a 4-game suspension. But there's players that have been suspended in the past who were good players, came back, and you don't even think about it anymore. Once he gets back on the field, no one's going to be worried about the fact that he would miss 2 games, 4 games. He proved himself last year in his rookie deal. And if you maybe need a veteran, a bit more consistency, someone a little bit safer, I think Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, good buys right now in the early second.
It sure looks like Dalton Kincaid's going to be the receiver overall, number 1 for the Buffalo Bills.
And take the Chiefs approach. Joe Brady moves the ball around the offense. When he was
does.
Carolina, DJ Moore had a really good season, but the entire team had a really equal target share, really.
like their
Keon Coleman going here, I don't think that Keon Coleman going and becoming the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo is a replacement for the numbers we saw Stephon Diggs put up.
No.
I think the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo, like you mentioned, receiver 1 might be Dalton Kincaid, and then it's just kind of 3 other guys, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, and Keon Coleman, that are taking the rest, and they're splitting it up pretty evenly.
Maybe Keon Coleman works out. I could see people advocating to draft him there, but Nate, I also get your point as to why you wouldn't. It's growing on me. Let's see what his ADP is by the time I'm drafting in some of my other leagues. Until then, I'm just going to keep on hating and not draft any Michael Penix Jr. because why in the world would you? Oh, I got him at the 212 or whatever, even though right now his Dynasty Rankings ADP is the 208, which is it's falling down and it's going to keep falling. I get it. In a couple years, this could be a steal. Okay, you do that with 4th and 5th round draft picks and thirds, not quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. Why would I draft him when at the 209 I could draft Marshawn Lloyd, who has a path to being more likely relevant
Yep.
than Michael Penix within the next few years? 210 Xavier Legette, 212 211 Roman Wilson, even the 212. If you want to stash somebody in the late second, stash Jermaine Burton at the 212, man. Troy
Yeah.
Franklin at the 301. Jatavian Sanders at the 302. Blake Corum at the 304. I think there's a case that Spencer Rattler is more relevant sooner than Michael Penix is, and by the time he gets on the field, he's going to be 26 years old. Bad footwork, plagued by injuries his first 4 years at Indiana, does not handle pressure in the pocket well, wonky throwing motion. No, thank you. I will just take my pick somewhere else. I'm good. You could sell that pick for Jameson Williams. And yeah, I've been a Jameson Williams hater. He's going to score more points this year than Michael Penix Jr. will.
Another quiet winner of the draft. The Lions did not go get a wide receiver too, so J-Mo's locked into that role.
I would use this pick to move up in the second as well. Bundle it with something else. Move up if you want to get a running back like Trey Benson, or you could wait on Marshawn Lloyd. Like I said, you could even move this pick for Khalil Shakir. It might be Khalil Shakir's season for all we know. So staying away from Michael Penix. Maybe the Falcons GM has a job soon. That seems unlikely. Nate, what is another player that you're avoiding and looking at the show sheet now? How dare you?
I'm sorry, Mike, but I'm avoiding Malachi Corley,
It's okay to be
especially at our current DR ADP of 206. So I think that's moving down. I think he's kind of being drafted more so late second, early third, which is a bit better. I'm more comfortable around there, but probably not until the early third. I'd probably look at other players in the late second, like the aforementioned Jermaine Burton, maybe even Troy Franklin, even though he got day 3 draft capital. Malachi Corley to me, I mean, I hate to say it, but he seems like a gadgety player to me. Now he is going to Robert Saleh's team, which, hey, Robert Saleh came from the 49ers. Deebo Samuel was there at the time, so maybe there's some kind of connection there. You know, everyone was calling Malachi Corley the next Deebo Samuel, but for me, he just doesn't do it. He just doesn't do it for me as, you know, that kind of player. So coming in as the wide receiver 3, there's going to be some opportunity there. But overall in this offense, I think Garrett Wilson is going to be an absolute target hog. I think where he's going to be easily surpassing 150 targets this year for the Jets offense. I don't know how much is going to be left for Malachi Corley. I don't know how efficient he's going to be on them. I'm sure he's going to get some manufactured touches in there. But this offense runs through Garrett Wilson. It runs through Breece Hall. And as good as Aaron Rodgers is, he's older. They're not going to be, you know, trying to have him out there in shootouts very often. They're going to try to win with an efficient offense. And you know, Mike Williams, unless he misses a ton of time, I think, you know, he's going to be the target number 2 at the wide receiver position over Malachi Corley. So, you know, I just don't personally believe in the talent enough, nor the offense overall, to think that there's really any significant production rookie year for Malachi Corley. And then I don't think he's also the kind of player that's going to stop the Jets from drafting a different wide receiver next year and trying to continue to add talent to that wide receiver room. So in the second round, not someone I'm targeting. I'm moving on from him. If I want to take a mid to late second and look for a wide receiver, you know, what can I do to get a guy like Christian Kirk, who, you know, might be a buy low a little bit right now because they drafted Brian Thomas Jr. in the first, but I think Christian Kirk's role is completely fine. I think he's still the number 1 wide receiver there. A guy like Evan Ingram, who is constantly undervalued despite being extremely productive at the tight end position. Maybe some tight ends, you know, what I can do with a mid-second. David Montgomery, Derrick Henry, some running backs I'd be targeting. You might have to add, you know, if you're moving like a late second, you're going to have to probably add to make those trades happen, but it's not going to take too much, I don't think. Rookie fever is pretty high right now. Yeah. Everyone loves a pick in the second round right now, as do I, but not for Malachi Corley.
Yeah, I'm really liking what the second round is bringing, but not this next player, and that is Ricky Pearsall. I'm calling him Sticky Ricky because I can. The 205, and okay, I get it. He was a first-round wide receiver. That being said, if I'm talking first-round wide receivers, I'd rather have Xavier Legette. I'm looking at the Dynasty Rewind ADP. Like I said, he's going off to 205. Okay? And I would rather trade up and get Keon Coleman. I'd rather trade up and get Xavier Worthy. I'd rather trade up one spot and get Jalen Polk if I'm just looking at wide receivers here. These are all players who are not the 4th option on their team. All right, you look at the San Francisco 49ers. Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, the target hog himself, Christian McCaffrey. I didn't think he was the best separator. I didn't think he was the most athletic wide receiver. I like Xavier Legette better. And you know what? I understand. Oh, how could you like Xavier Legette better? Ricky Pearsall, another fifth-year wide receiver who didn't do much before this past year, didn't really do that much this year either. I know Florida is not the greatest passing school, but still, at least Xavier Legette had some sort of breakout.
I'm a little bit higher on Ricky than you are.
Prove
I
me
don't
wrong.
like the situation, though. I think it's going to
If
be
I'm
someone
wrong,
you got to
I'll
hold on
admit
to
I'm
for a
wrong.
while.
That's all I'm saying. I could be wrong, but still, at that point, I would just rather look elsewhere. It's a second-round pick. I want some production from my second-round pick, which is another reason I'm avoiding Michael Penix. I don't want my second-round picks on the taxi squad. These are guys that need to at least be on the bench. We're like, okay, it's week 4. You're starting to build some momentum here. I can at least consider putting you into the lineup. I don't see that with these two guys I just talked about. I could sell it for players like Ramondre Stevenson, Brian Robinson, who I think is going to be the starter in Washington. So I'd rather move these picks for guys like that. Terry McLaurin, I could probably get for that pick as well. He's going to be more productive than Ricky Pearsall this year.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you got another quarterback for us. This guy was supposed to be the quarterback. Instead, he wasn't. Who do you got?
Yeah, Spencer Rattler goes to the Saints day 3, and someone that we had heard a lot of talk about him going day 2, but we didn't see any quarterbacks go day 2. There was over 100 picks between the quarterback 6 off the board and the quarterback 7 off the board.
Insane.
So Spencer Rattler had quite the fall, goes to the Saints, which I'm okay with this landing spot long term. He sits behind Derek Carr. Maybe he can develop something. If not, then they pick another quarterback. Maybe in the meantime, there's low risk, high reward for the Saints here at the point that they picked him. But for my fantasy teams, right now going off in the mid-third, 305, 307, depending on where you look, I would just rather have a player like you were just talking about, Mike. I'd rather have a player that produces for me. I don't need to pick up Spencer Rattler in the 3rd round because a year from now, I probably can pick him up for a 3rd round pick or a 4th round pick when he's just sitting behind Derek Carr, who's locked into the Saints for 2 years because if they just moved his money around and now he's guaranteed to be there for 2 years.
Throwing in a trade too, possibly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Spencer Rattler is going to be accessible later. You don't need to spend an opportunity to get somebody else who might not be accessible later to go get Spencer Rattler right now, who does not have a path to production anytime soon. And that's something I'm always looking for, especially with my mid and late round picks, is what's the opportunity to production here? Because I can go over and pick up a tight end. I could pick up a tight end like Theo Johnson in the mid-3rd. He's going to have a chance of production earlier than Spencer Rattler. I can pick up a running back that I love like Ray Davis, who went to the Buffalo Bills and is probably going to slide right into their RB2 role. And there's going to be production right there. You can flip him for a second, plus Spencer Rattler within a couple weeks of the season. So, when there's other guys going, especially like Adonai Mitchell, Devontae Walker, not guys that stand out as, big producers right away, but they at least have the potential to do that. Spencer Rattler, I don't really see it here. I don't know why I would move a 3rd round pick, a mid-3rd pick to draft him when it just doesn't make sense to me, Mike. So going after those other players, maybe if I can move a 3rd round pick for a guy like Gus Edwards, who is incredibly undervalued for the production he's going to give you this year. Devin Singletary, same thing there. Not scared of Tyrone Tracy taking his work. Sorry, Zach. I like Tyrone Tracy a little bit in that spot, but Devin Singletary is the man. Player. Yeah. And then maybe 3rd round pick, Tyler Lockett, Rashad Bateman, some wide receivers I'd be going after right now. Rashad Bateman, wide receiver 2 right now for the 2-time MVP, locked in for a couple more years. I like Bateman a lot. I know the production has not followed, but for a 3rd round pick, I'm interested still.
Also for Jayden Daniels, because I'm not going to draft him either, especially not at the 107. Although this is our ADP we're going off of here. Most of the drafts I've seen, he is going much higher.
103, 104.
104-ish. Yet another reason to avoid. I see some good traits, and then I see a lot of inconsistencies, and I know that that's just a quarterback thing. Let's take out the fact that I don't like the way he protects himself when he runs or doesn't protect himself. I didn't think he was that great of a runner. I thought he was okay, but I didn't think he was that much better really watching him run than Drake May. Drake May, quote unquote, sneaky athletic. I thought his arm was slightly above average. I didn't think it was really anything special. But the fact of the matter is, when you win the Heisman Trophy at LSU as quarterback, you get noticed, you get drafted highly. Why am I avoiding? There's just other guys I would rather get. For the 107, I think I could get Dalton Kincaid plus. And as I alluded to before, I think Dalton Kincaid could be the focal point of a very, very good offense led by Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid, that's a connection I want part of. Could I get Dak in Superflex for the 107?
Probably, especially with the whole talk about his contract and stuff like that, which Cowboys are going to pay him. They're going to have to. I mean, what else are they going to do?
If they don't, he's going to be a starting quarterback somewhere in the NFL next year.
That'll be fine.
If he's a free agent, there's going to be teams knocking.
Get paid.
Exactly. He's going to get paid either way. He's going to be a starting quarterback. If he doesn't get paid by the Cowboys, who's to say the Seahawks don't sign him?
Yeah.
Right? They're going to be without a quarterback after this year.
Don't get me excited like that. I have so much Dak Prescott.
Imagine Dak Prescott throwing to DK Metcalf, JSN, Tyler Lockett. I would take Dak over Jayden Daniels, and it's not even close, to be honest with you. We know he's going to be productive this year and for a number of years. Probably get James Cook and a little bit more for the 107 as well.
Yeah, you can definitely get plus from there.
Yeah. So if you need a tight end, get a good tight end out there. I would say go for Sam Laporta, but I think it's going to cost more than the 107. Get a high caliber starting quarterback. Get a high caliber starting running back. There's options out there. If you don't like it, trade back, possibly. Trade back and get Bo Nix. I'd rather do that. Nate, I think you got one more. I got one more. Let's wrap it up.
Yep. I got Luke McCaffery. Look, we had a lot of players in this draft who had fathers, brothers that played in the NFL.
The Nepo draft.
The Nepo draft. And Luke McCaffery joins them. Drafted day 2, was not a day 2 player on our scouting, not on my scouting. I don't believe on your scouting either. He's definitely a developmental wide receiver. I would have expected him more like in the 5th round. I thought he was overdrafted by the Commanders, who otherwise had a pretty great draft. Now, the good thing is Luke McCaffery goes in. He's the wide receiver 3 at best there. Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin definitely have the top 2 spots locked down. So there is opportunity for him to develop. He's not going to be thrown into a starting spot right away. So, with the physical traits that he brings, the former quarterback, so, he's got, despite being a larger guy, he's got some pretty good flexibility on him and yards after the catch ability. There's a lot of hype around the profile that he brings. A lot of people compared him to Puka Nacua early on in the draft process as kind of that late round sleeper. He is going right now. DR ADP has him at the 407, which is a little ridiculous, I think, for a day 2 wide receiver. Keep Straight Cut has him at 303. I think that's a little bit ridiculous for the talent that he has and the development he's going to take. I would have him more so mid to late 3rd, I think, is where he should fit in.
That feels better.
There's a good amount of wide receivers I would rather have before Luke McCaffrey. There's a couple of running backs I'd have before McCaffrey. I would draft Michael Penix before Luke McCaffrey, which anyone should, let's be honest.
In the 4th round?
In the 3rd round, I'm drafting Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah, I mean,
because he's the 8th overall pick. Throw him in your taxi squad if you want.
Sure.
But Luke McCaffrey. Sure. There you go. Thank you, Mike.
Bob wouldn't. Bob's with me on this one.
No, Bob would probably draft him. No, he probably wouldn't.
He flat out said he's going to have 0 shares.
I wish I could find a league where he's sitting there like the 401 for Bob and see what he does. But Luke McCaffrey, I just think there's too much development for him to be an early 3rd round pick. I think it's an offense that's going to struggle a little bit. And once it even gets going, got Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Ben Sinnott there. We got Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson out of the backfield. There's a lot of mouths to feed before we get to Luke McCaffrey.
Olamide Zaccheaus, James Crowder, Diami Brown, Dax Milne,
Crowder. I love
Mitchell Tinsley. Keeps getting better.
Look, there's just a lot of people before Luke McCaffrey, and that's assuming that Jayden Daniels hits. So I think there's just a lot of hoops to jump through before we get to Luke McCaffrey being a productive wide receiver. So I'm not looking at him anywhere in the 3rd round.
I'm also avoiding a guy in the 4th round as well. That's Will Shipley. I know you think the Eagles are a good landing spot, but not necessarily for running backs the way they've used running backs. They didn't just give Saquon Barkley $30-some million overall or whatever it was to play Will Shipley over him. It's just not going to happen. The coaching staff still likes Kenneth Gainwell. Look, Will Shipley has some really good traits about him. Traitsy, as I like to say here. He's a really good receiving back, and that's kind of about it. I didn't think he was super powerful through the line of scrimmage, which you kind of have to be in the NFL. He has some good traits. I like him as being part of the Eagles, more as being an Eagles fan. I don't think he's going to have a lot of fantasy relevance. I think you're just going to be wasting a taxi spot on him. For him to be relevant, it's going to be hard. I would use the 403 to move up into the 3rd. Pick someone else like Kamani Vidal.
Yeah, I love me some Vidal.
4. Yep. Or I'd trade out altogether. Guys like Kendrick Bourne could be had with this pick. Jalen Hyatt, you might have to add a little bit, but I have not super high expectations, but higher expectations of what Will Shipley is going to give you. Tyler Boyd is actually valued very similar to this as well. On Keep Trade Cut, you'll obviously have to add for that as well. Just use this pick to make your roster better. Even if it doesn't involve you drafting someone, how can you capitalize on a 4th round pick to make your team better? That's what you need to do. And one way to do that is to get a roster review on PayHip, payhip.com/Dynasty Rewind. Pick up a copy of our draft guide, or I will be sad. So until next time, Nate, I'm your host, Michael Bauer. Thank you for listening.